Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. In this episode I'm going to be looking at this rather lovely DJH kit-built Duchess locomotive that belongs to Pete over at Delft Junction. Now we bought this at a toy fair as a runner, but as is usual he's got it home and it's showing no signs of life. So I'm going to give it a quick battery test on here to see if we can get any sort of action from this model. And unfortunately there's also a problem with the front pony bogey, which it won't sit on the rails correctly, so I'm going to have a look at that as well. So applying battery power to the track, there is absolutely no movement from this model whatsoever. The motor appears to be giving off a slight hum, but it isn't attempting to move. So no matter what I do, nothing will get this model into life. Excuse me. So we're going to have to put it in the loco cradle and have a look and see if we can figure out what's going on. Now, with this being a brass kit-built loco, I really don't want to start taking this apart. I don't want to ruin that beautiful paint job. So I'm going to see if it's something simple or whether I'm going to have to dig deeper into this model. So I'm going to start by cleaning the wheels up. The wheels do look incredibly dirty. And you can see here, just by polishing this wheel with a cotton bud and meths, you can see the shine that's coming on it already. And I'm very surprised to see that there is actually quite a lot of dirt on this model. So it has ran at some point to accumulate the dirt that's on it. I'm also going to clean the tender wheels up, as I believe that these pick up power from one of the rails and the driving wheels on the other, having looked inside with a flashlight just to see the electronics. So I'll get some leads from an old Hornby controller now that have got a bit more oomph than a battery. And on the wheels I've cleaned, you can see that the motor is starting to turn. Now, what it turned out to be, and you'll see quite a lot of this running upside down in this video, is the more I ran it, the looser it became. And it became apparent that there was no lubrication on the bearings at all. And the drivetrain had seized up ever so slightly, preventing it from running properly. So by applying a small amount of power, you see I can just put that wire there on those brass parts. And apologies for my sleeve there. The more I ran the model with the wheels revolving, the looser it became. And all of a sudden, as you'll notice in a minute, it frees itself up and jumps into life and starts running at a reasonable speed. Now, there is no unusual noises. It was just a case of dry lubrication and dry bearings, I think, that was stopping this model from running properly. So now I can leave the power leads balanced on the wheels there, and it's actually running, albeit in reverse. It's running rather nicely, and it's allowing me to clean the wheels properly whilst they are rotating. I've taken the cap off my fiberglass pencil here because I'm getting down to the last knockings of this, and with the cap on it won't extend too far. But as you can see, I'm polishing the wheels up rather nicely, and they are coming back up to have a nice sheen on them. So the wheels rotating like this, it is kind of a self-cleaning thing here. They clean and rotate against this fiberglass pencil. I then finish off by polishing them up with a cotton bud and meths, and I'm going to add a small amount of modelling oil to the axles using this Fleischmann pin dropper that I've got. And just a small amount of oil on those bearings will loosen them up to the extent where it will become nice and free running with any luck. And hopefully I won't have to try and disassemble the model and try and take the body shell off. But you can see now that it is actually running rather nicely. The wheels are all going round, nothing is catching. The side rods are running as they should be. So I'm pretty confident now that the only problem with this kit-built loco was the fact that it hadn't seen use for a while, and that the moving parts, especially the axles and gear train, had actually started to seize up. There's still muck coming off the wheels, so like I said to you at the start, you will see this model running a lot upside down in this video. So I am going to give these a thorough clean until there is no dirt coming off these whatsoever. And it is just a case of working through the cotton bud and meths until all the gunk and crud has been removed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to test all the wheels to make sure they're all picking up. The front pony wheels don't pick anything up, they are insulated, but the 3 loco driving wheels do. And then the opposite side on the tender, the 3 tender wheels pick up. So it's a bit like an old Ringfield tender drive model in respects to the pickups on it. So now I'm going to have to clean the tender wheels. These are rotated by hand because it's unpowered, obviously. Again, rotated against the fiberglass pencil until the wheels are nice and shiny. Now these wheels do have a kind of a gold patina to them. So I'm going to clean the wheels until they are up to that nice shiny standard. One other problem with this loco is that the tender drawbar is badly bent. It bends downwards. So I'm going to have to try and remove this small nut off this bolt. Now my hex drivers were too small, they wouldn't go around the nut. So I resorted to getting my small smooth nose pliers and undid the nut a quarter of a turn until it came off. Now this took some time. I'm going to have to invest in some bigger hex drivers. But eventually the nut came to the top. It broke through a layer of what I can only call was super glue on the thread that was holding it in place. And you can see there just how bent that tender drawbar has become. And there's also some missing paint on there, so I'll have a look at this. But you can see the detail on this model for a kit-built loco, and this is a DJH product. This really is a lovely looking and well detailed model. It is also exceptionally heavy, being made almost entirely out of brass. So I'm giving the tender a dust over there to get rid of that dust, and then using my flat nose, my flat grip pliers, I'm going to straighten this tender drawbar out as best I can, as the bolt on the tender to release the drawbar completely was held in place with some sort of two-part epoxy resin, so I couldn't undo it. You'll see now that that's done, this front pony wheel is not sitting on the track correctly. You can see there when the loco is level, the front wheel is lifting up. Now this was causing it to derail on points apparently, so I'm going to have to try and remove this and see if we can remedy what's going on here. Now holding it to its extreme curvature, it reveals a flat-headed screw. So I'm going to undo this off the pony bogey mount and then have a look at the bogey itself. Now I don't actually think there's anything wrong with this. This is sitting nice and square and flush to the floor, and it rolls freely. So I've got a feeling the problem may be this brass part that protrudes down here. I believe this should have a small kink in it to hold that bogey in place, but it hasn't. You can see there just how well built and painted this model actually is, and it really does look nice in this British Rail Express Passenger Blue. I've never actually had much to do with the DJH kits before, but if this is anything to go by, they look to be extremely good quality products. The only thing wrong with this bodywork wise is a slight yellowing of the gloss varnish, but that does come with older varnishes with age. Now testing the front bogey on the track, you can see that it is sitting nice, level and flush. I don't think there's anything wrong with the bogey construction in itself. I do believe now, looking at it, the problem lies with this brass retaining piece that hangs down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small kink in that just to hold the bogey flat. Now that that's been done, I'm going to just have a look and bend these guard irons back to where they should be. And then I'm going to oil the axles again with that Fleischmann pin dropper, because all the axles on this are extremely dry. And then I'm going to clean the wheel treads with a fiberglass pencil and cotton bud and meths. There's no point in cleaning just the driving wheels, because if you leave the dirt on the other wheels, it will just transfer to the track and then transfer to the electrical pickup wheels, so you're just creating yourself a problem later on. Once everything's clean, I'm going to line that screw back up and then retighten that brass screw to reattach the front pony wheel to the loco. And this was quite fiddly. Space was at a premium doing this, so it wasn't the easiest thing to take apart, but I really didn't want to mess with this too much. I didn't want to ruin that paint job, or indeed undo a bolt or nut that then I couldn't get access to reassemble it. But once the front bogey was reattached, I tested the model again on the track, and everything was sitting as it should. So it was a problem with that retaining piece of brass there. Now that's got a small bend in it, it's working as it should, and it's not lifting those two front wheels off at all. I'm just giving it another rocker test here, and all seems to be good. So I'm happy that we've managed to remedy all the obvious faults with this model. So now it's back into the loco cradle again. The loco's back upside down, and it's at this point where I mentioned earlier I cleaned the wheels on that front pony wheel. These were just rotated by hand again, fiberglass pencil, and then a cotton bud of methylated spirits to polish them up. So once the wheels were cleaned, the only other thing I'm going to have to do, there is no rear coupling on this tender at all, and Pete did say he'd like a coupling to be able to allow it to haul trains, so I'm going to make one out of this length of 0.5mm brass wire, just by bending it around so it sits under the buffer beam there. This was bent into place and then secured with Loctite super glue, and then once it was thoroughly dried I gave it a quick coat of satin black paint. Now bending up couplings is not my forte, I'm not that good at it, but with persistence I managed to make a reasonable hoop that was glued to the rear of this tender to allow it to haul trains when it goes back to the layout. And like I said, this was just secured in place with some Loctite super glue. So I'm just measuring it up there and bending it with my tweezer nose pliers. Like I say, not the most technical way of doing it, and probably very wrong, but it's the way I've done it, and it's worked well on other locos like Hornby class 50s and 60s, and the odd steam engine I've got with wire couplings. So once that's done and was glued in place, I then put the loco back in the cradle. Time to replace these parts. Now on the tender drawbar there is a washer and a spring connection that goes on. These are all put into place, and then the tender is then upended and put back in, but I'm going to put this in the loco cradle resting on something to bring it up to the same height as that so it doesn't bend the drawbar again. So I'm going to use my old paintbrush just so that tender sits a bit higher. And then the nut was replaced, and this was easier to put it back on because the thread had been cleaned. I was able to tighten that almost down with finger pressure, just doing the last few turns with my pliers as I did when I undid it. And then once the nut was in place, I then put a small amount of Loctite super glue back on that thread, just so that it doesn't come off in the future. A quick test with the leads when I've got power to make sure that it's now correctly picking up as it should, and I've deliberately set the controller at a slow speed this time so that I know the motor will work at slow speeds, and it's all working as it should. So hopefully we've now restored this DJH Duchess, or as it is, I think it's City of Glasgow as it stands, back to running order. So this is the super glue, just with a pin there, just a small amount on that pin head, just on that screw thread there, just so that bolt doesn't fall off on its own accord whilst it's running. But as it's a super glue thread on brass, it will come off relatively easy if somebody wants to undo that in the future. So that's virtually it, I think. I'm just going to give it another test. You can see that loop coupling I've made at the back there. And because I was handing this back to Pete at Trains for You, I gave the model a quick run on their layout. If you've got an engine you'd like to see featured on Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. I'll have a look at getting it sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. Now, unfortunately for Pete, this Duchess wouldn't tolerate curves below third radius, and his layout has several second radius curves. So he traded it in and got himself a nice Bachmann 9F in its place. It was also nice to work on something a bit different, not some of the ready-to-run stuff that we usually do. Like I said, it is a shame Pete couldn't keep it, as it is an absolutely stunning model, but it has been built to higher tolerances than most ready-to-run stuff. Thanks again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you again in the next video. Bye for now.